Welcome everyone to IGCA's latest webinar. This is part of our webinar series, which we do once every 2 months. We'd like to do it more often, so we're going to try to ramp that up for everyone. Today we're discussing ESG issues, environment, sustainability, and governance, with 3 very esteemed guests who come from all over the world. I will let them introduce themselves in a little bit after I get through some of the admin issues that I'd like to discuss. If you guys have any questions as you're listening to our panelists, make sure to drop the question in the chat or in the Q&A, and I will try to incorporate those questions into the discussion. I will be moderating the discussion on behalf of IGCA. We are recording the webinar, so hopefully we'll have a transcript and recording on YouTube and elsewhere within the next 2 weeks, give or take. So you can stay tuned for that too. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Nicole to please introduce herself first, and then we'll jump into our webinar, which we have 5 good questions to discuss among our panelists. Nicole?
Thank you, Matteo. Good afternoon. Hello, Gabriela. Hello, Claudia. The good things of internet, we are all connected. And hello, good afternoon to all our audience. My name is Nicole Finopoulou. By practice, I'm a lawyer, banking and financial services specialized. And the last 8 years, I'm fully involved in ESG and sustainability and sustainable finance initiatives, and personally, I'm a full supporter of the idea and trainings. And hopefully we can support and give some insights. The rest, I think you can find them on the slide and the introduction by ICGA. Hopefully, if you want, we can connect through LinkedIn, or if we can answer any questions or any worries, hopefully we can help in this webinar. Matteo?
Thank you, Nicole. Gabriela?
Good afternoon. I am calling from London, England. I am CEO and co-founder of iClimate Earth. We are a green fintech. We started this venture about 2 years ago, very much motivated by the idea that the products in the financial space and ETFs, which are exchange-traded funds in particular, were not telling the relevant story of how to mitigate climate change and innovation. So that's how we are part of this ESG trend. We don't use ESG scorecards. We'll get into that in much more detail later on. But we were very much motivated by the idea that we need to start applying and quantifying and relying on tangible metrics as opposed to black boxes. And I think it's one of the main things that I would like to discuss in more detail today. So a final point is about what we do. We have developed equity benchmarks, again, because we thought that the whole industry was not telling the story that we think it's very relevant. So we developed these benchmarks ourselves. They are published and calculated by Solactive, a very reputable German benchmark administrator. And then with that, we vertically integrated and we launched the exchange-traded funds that track our own equity benchmarks. And we launched the first 2 funds. The first one is a decarbonization enablers ETF, is a UCITS, which means that it's suitable for European investors. And we launched that in December last year. We're live in quite a few exchanges across Europe. And then the second fund tells the story of the decentralization of our grid, local energy that's being produced at the point of consumption. Those of you lucky enough to be in Cyprus really know what that means, right? To use that solar rooftop for your own electricity needs, to satisfy your own needs with what is called behind the meter, right? Generation at the point of consumption. So we launched that. That was our second launch in Europe. And then we launched in July, both funds at the New York Stock Exchange. So we're now also live in the US. So I have some observations in terms of where we are on the ESG space in Europe and where we are in the US. And spoiler alert, there's a striking gap, right? Which is something that I think we'll cover in more detail later on as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Gabriela. Last but not least, Claudia.
Hello, everybody. Well, good morning for me. I'm on the side of the planet, which is the Caribbean, and good afternoon to all of you on the European side. My name is Claudia Alvarez Troncoso. I am a lawyer by a profession, but more than 20 years on the compliance and sustainability side. I come from the social and corporate governance and ethics part of ESG. I'm also a member of the board for our Dominican chapter for International Transparency, IT. And I also work with our government with regulations and norms that need to be updated or new ones that need to be emitted to be aligned with all these aspects of international ESG norms, and also from the anti-corruption side, which something that I will speak about, how the ESG also is necessary to move on these issues also for better transparency. So I'm coming from that side of ESG.
Excellent. So it seems we have a very, very varied kind of range of positions here. Someone who works in financial services and banking. We have fintech. We have also from the governance and kind of anti-corruption and transparency sector. So this should be a great discussion. So let's move on with our first question, which, as you all know, the title of the webinar is the past, present, and future of ESG. So before moving into the present and the future, of course, let's discuss a little bit, what is ESG? What does it entail? And how did it actually come to the attention of today's business world? How did it gain so much notoriety these days? Gabriela, do you want to kick us off with that question? Kind of give us your brief introduction to that.
Sure, thank you for that. Well, we've been looking at this space for quite some time, but I have to say that those that are real movers and shakers, they've been doing this for really a long time, 15 years plus. So in a way, it kind of feels like it's a new development. But there's been a lot of advocates that for a very long time, since the 90s, have been proposing a way for us to measure sustainability, have a way to quantify, hold companies accountable, have very clear metrics to be able to vet the companies that are doing well and those that are not doing enough. So it's kind of like the idea of the carrot and the stick. So it has evolved across many years, very much as a tool, I think, to make companies accountable for their actions, right? Do you have water contamination issues? How are you treating your employees? How transparent are you? What about now, very much so about climate change related emission figures, right? But so a comprehensive set of indicators that would allow us to look at companies, not just from the pure financial metrics of revenue, EBITDA margins, net income, and growth, profitability, right? That endless pursuit of more free cash flow generation. How you're doing that matters in a great deal. And then came the idea, my business school in particular, I went to Wharton, right? We're very, very big believers in that, that there is that extra return that comes from companies that are very strong on E, S, and G for a variety of different reasons. But the general idea is that you're better managed, that you have better principles, and therefore you're more sustainable and you will produce higher cash flow for a longer period of time, right? And lower risks. So the idea of using E, S, and G also as a proxy for risk, delivery risk on desirable outcomes. So the whole industry developed from it's kind of like a weighted average of all these different goals and aspirations and tools. And then more recently, in the last 3-4 years, a plethora of different data providers started attempting to quantify and have a way to compare companies across different industries, right? And that's how this ESG scorecard phenomena has developed. And then products, and by products, I mean financial products, funds, were built with the idea of, oh, let me represent the companies that score really high according to data provider A, B, or C. And that's, I think, very much where we are right now on the ESG, bringing the past to the present, right? And the criticisms that were, as an industry, hearing, rightly so. So we'll get into the present in later on. But I think it's been this evolution of ESG as a final product, but also as a tool, right? As an end and as a means, and that's why it's a very powerful notion, because it's both, right? It's the means to an end, and it's the end in itself. But we have some issues to fix, so we'll get into that later.
Excellent, thank you, Gabi. Nicole, your perspective from the financial services banking sector, again, in terms of the history of ESG.
Thank you. I would like to to complete on what Gabriela mentioned. Exactly, ESG is a notion. It's not something new. It has always been around, at least very actively, but now it's becoming more active, especially when people and when actually governments are more involved after the UN 2030 agreement in Paris. And there's also the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. But I will take a step further back from what Gabriela already said. It's because you have to sort of the jurisdiction where each has evolved, because we don't have to forget that ESG stands for environmental, social, governance, which is the factors, so it's factors, criteria that are used to measure sustainability. Sustainability is a bigger umbrella. And ESG is the good way, and it's one of the tools, and I will agree totally with Gabriela, it's part of the tools that you have to consider as each government and each business to come across and how to have on its own a sustainability development goal. Doesn't mean you have to have the 17 under the UN 2030, but it's up to you internally, risk management, governance, not risk management only for the financial. The good thing with financial is because at least it started at EU level. It started across, but at EU level, because you have 20 now, 16, 17 member states, there is a uniform regulation that at least asks the asset managers who have the products, who have the money in a way, to consider this, to include it in their sustainability reports, and they have to make reports out of this. So it's a way to make them think about ESG and to consider them in when assessing towards their clients and towards where they invest funds and where funds are invested. And hopefully it doesn't mean, I agree again with Gabriela, and I think Claudia may also, it doesn't mean that because it's water contamination, it's not because it's climate change, it's 17 different goals. And each business has to consider where they are investing, where they're doing impactful investments to mean something, and what it means to themselves and what it means to their business, their organization. It's both an internal and external exercise for all businesses. And they have the means. Okay, we have a way to go, but it's there, it's here, and it will stay. So people have to understand what ESG means, and that are factors and tools. There's no tick the box, there's no IFRS standards, there's no GRI standards. So it's about brains, it's about people thinking about the future and the future generations. And it's not charity, it's not only charity, it's part of it. Charity is only part of it.
Thank you, Nicole. And Claudia, your perspective from Latin America?
Yes, well, as Gabriela said, it's like different issues that were isolated, and now they're being seen as one thing. And I think Nicole hit it right in bullseye. This is something that these are risk factors to be measured. These are tools that you will need to use and to utilize in your company for enterprise risk measurements and to be aware of what's going on, not only what you are doing, in what area your company is transacting, third parties also. And as this will be maturing from every year on, this is something that will not go away, as Nicole said. And it has also been something that different areas or control departments or control areas in different companies that are, especially those that are in regulated aspects of the business, and have been dealing with from in one way or another, be it from ABC and anti-bribery corruption, and then you risk manage for anything in AML, compliance, regulatory compliance, or whatever. Now ESG is in this aspect also with the risk measurements, and so it's not going away. And I think that it's been in the last 2 or 3 years, it's been an issue that's been arising because of all that's been going on in the world due to human rights issues. I think that's one of the things that have been accelerating ESG, and also, of course, the environment and how it's getting worse every year, and the need for all governments in all countries to be aware of it. And as Nicole said, it's not something that is just go out and like clean the oceans or plant a tree or donations or charity or whatever. It's way more than that. Sustainability for the company, for everything that it surrounds the company, all of the chain that goes in the business, and for the people that are inside the company, for all the third parties that the companies touch, and of course for future generations to have the same or better future and resources that we have now, because this is a finite, and we need to work towards it being an infinite, so that everyone can have an access to it. And of course, the financial aspect is really, really important. And I think it's really important that the financial banking and investments have become aware of it, have been pushing it, because it's not all just a return for the investment, a return for the shareholder. You have to return to the planet, to the society as a whole. And so we need to learn about all of this. And I think that Latin America has way much to go for. Still, we don't have any regulations or norms regarding ESG. We have norms regarding regulatory compliance in certain aspects, and we have AML, and we have aspects for anti-money laundering, anti-bribery and corruption, not all of our countries, but still ESG needs to be something of more importance of an issue, with human rights, with diversity, with integrity, and of course the corporate governance also needs to be more mature. We have some little steps that have been taken in Latin American countries, but still ways to go. Thank you,
Claudia. Okay, that kind of sets the scene for our discussion, and now let's move into the present. We have 3 questions that will kind of focus on the current state of ESG. So I know the question here is, why is ESG important for your business? But I'm going to kind of change it a little bit. Let's say you have a business and you're pitching to them as to why they should actually get involved with ESG. I want each one of you to give me one reason as to why ESG is important to that business. I'm going to put Nicole on the spot first. So tell me, why should a company, consider ESG? Why is it important to them? One reason.
Governance. For me, the first is governance. It helps you to see the risk management in governance and to assess the whole situation. Where are you going? And when I'm talking about governance, I'm not talking by compliance. Not only the regulation that exists, not only the fact that you have to do some things because you have to do them because of law, because of statutory. It's a mindset. It's ethical. Governance comes to ethics. So it's about the people, it's about how they think and how you go forward, because you may do something today that is right, but tomorrow something changes. So you have to have the governance, the mentality to be able to adapt to the change. So personally, as one thing for me, it's governance, and everything adds up. Even financial is governance. Even it's not only corporate governance in the meaning of compliance. is generally the concept of governance, personally for me. But okay, all can add up. All add up. Somehow everything adds up, but you ask one thing.
Yep. Gabriela?
Yeah, I hear Nicole, but for us is environmental, right? Climate change supersedes everything, and it has to be E, because whether you are doing less harm, right? Looking at your own carbon footprint and the way you produce something or the way you provide a service, right? You have a carbon footprint, you have, you use resources that are finite, that belongs to the planet, and you need to be accountable for that. Or whether you provide a solution, which is the companies that we're representing, the companies that are really, providing a way for us to move away from the business as usual, which is fossil fuel based and high emissions, but low emissions or even zero emissions. If you're providing a solution, well, then let's quantify how valuable and relevant that solution is, because there is a race. We're running out of time, and it's very important that we keep the eye on the ball on what is relevant. So whether it's because you're problem solving great thing, or whether you're trying to do less harm, so you're the user, right, of the solutions, we need tangible, quantifiable metrics on environmental points.
Thank you, Gabriela. So we have two positions. What's your take, Claudia?
Okay, my intake is a combination, but I come from the S and the G side of the ESG. I totally think that, as Nicole said, ethics is a very important thing in all of this. This is a mindset, and I think that's going to drive every other decision that's being made by the companies, and of course, the support needed and the pressure needed by the civil society and society as a whole to make the governments know what is the necessary things to do, and for the changes to be made, and for the laws to be emitted. That is really important. I think that ethics and the way of the mindset, of course, reputation is very, very big on this, and that will drive also into the financial side of the business. This makes totally financial sense to go into use ESG metrics. It's going to be something that will attract more business. It's going to be more ethical business, more responsible business, and of course, so sustainable in the future. Or so, it's totally. I think it's not a no-brainer. Of course, you have to learn about this. You have to change your mindset and see it. Not only that you're going to win X amount of money, but what other intangible in return you're going to get, and how you're going to impact lives. And that's, I think, the best thing of all of this.
Excellent, thank you. Of course, given the times and given the pandemic we're living through, we had to have a COVID-related question. So, I mean, as with everything in life these days, COVID has impacted us in many different ways. I mean, how has the COVID-19 pandemic actually impacted ESG and ESG practices these days? Claudia, do you want to get us started with that one?
Sure. Well, I think that, of course, just as we have mentioned in my last answer, it just makes financial sense. And the COVID pandemic has made all the companies around the world have to pivot on the way that they do business, right? And so we are now in internet, more using internet. We're working from home or in a distance. The chain of supplies has changed, and we're going to see the impact starting at the end of this year and next year. And so we have to think that there are external risks that we have no control over, and that we have no foresight on this issue, specifically on the pandemic of COVID. No one was looking at it, even though the World Economic Forum did have that risk as a possibility, but no one was really looking on that side. And so to be sustainable, COVID has showed us that there are different ways to do business, and that we have to be more in tune with all of the risks going on the social aspects, especially, right? That the COVID, what has told us, and it has told us that we are vulnerable, and that our business are vulnerable too, and that we need to listen to our employees, we need to listen to our consumers, that there are human rights aspects that have been impacted too with health, of course, financial freedom, the economies of lots of people and countries have gone into issues, it has been an issue and have gone into troubles. And the freedom to go outside, to move from one space to another, or from one country to another. And so I think that's a big gift that COVID has taught us. And this is the planet that we live in, and then we have to take care of it if we're going to go also to the part of the environment. And I'm sure Gabriela is going to speak to that more. So I think that aspect of to be in tune, that we are diverse, that we need to learn to work with one another, to live with one another, even though we have different thoughts and ways of thinking. So I think that's what COVID has brought on the ESG side.
Thank you. Gabriela, the environment. How has the environment been affected by COVID? Has it been good? Has it been bad? I'd like to hear your take on that.
I think COVID was a very dramatic example, right? For the deniers that are still out there, and for example, in the US, there are quite a few of those, right? Of how this is no doubt a man-made problem, because we stopped our economies from running business as usual, right? And we stopped the coal-fired power plants, we stopped the natural gas fire power plants because we closed the industries and we closed the malls, right? And that demand for energy just all of a sudden disappeared.
Right.
And we saw what happened. Greenhouse gas emissions dropped for a short period of time, but they drop materially, right? So that's man-made. So let's not mix carbon dioxide with carbon monoxide, but also pollution, right? Which is not a greenhouse gas, but carbon monoxide. Even China, Beijing, you've seen the pictures, right, of the beautiful blue skies, right? So that I think was a shocking, striking image to all of us, right? The 7 billion people on the planet, that, my gosh, we're really in this race, continue to produce things in a very unsustainable way, and we're destroying the planet in the process, right? So I think that as all stopping that continuous chase for higher GDP made us see, right, that we're damaging the planet. It was so in front of us, right? We could see from images of parks in Thailand, right? That all of a sudden within 5-6 months, without having people go there, right? The plastic waste went away, vegetation, right? Just came back to life, right? I mean, we're destroying the planet. And I think COVID showed to us, but it also showed, to Claudia's point, that there's alternatives that are there for us to use to the benefit of higher kind of lifestyle improvements, and also to the benefit of the planet. And telepresence is one of them. We follow the findings of Project Drawdown. Telepresence is a solution. In the study was done between 2014 and 2017. And back then we're like, what is telepresence? What are they talking about? Right? It's like, the Jetsons, the future of the robot. It sounded so impossible. How are we to communicate? No, I have to jump on a plane and shake people's hands, right? Well, guess what? No, because we launched the business without ever meeting our partners in the US and in Europe. We just recently met them in person for the first time. And we got a lot of stuff done. We have almost 200 million under management, right? All through Zoom, right? So that also is evidence that there are many solutions that are out there, and we need to look at what is relevant, scale them up, and do better, and use these ESG metrics as a way for us to have that roadmap. This is where we are. We can quantify, we can analyze what we're doing that is right, what we're doing that is wrong, and have a very clear set of goals for how to get there, and use ESG as that roadmap. And I think in a way, as Winston Churchill said, and when you live in England, you have to quote Churchill every now and then, don't ever let a crisis go to waste, right? So this was, of course, a pandemic, a very sad thing. Thousands of people died. I grew up in Brazil. It was hard to watch the news for all the loss of life. But let's learn out of this. And I think we can see that we can really make an impact on the planet if we just try really hard. And ESG gives us the tools.
Thank you, Gabriela. Nicole?
Personally, I'm very happy to share exactly what Claudia and what Gabriela have shared. Just another perspective from my side is because, okay, I'm happy to be a financial banking lawyer in an EU and having everything to be developed under the European Green Deal and everything. Though still, as to Cyprus, because I know people are from Cyprus, we are still a small jurisdiction, and unfortunately, we're doing baby steps. We may be doing ESG, and actually, without realizing it, people and big business are doing ESG in a different way, but without realizing it, they're getting there. The pandemic definitely, I totally agree, has changed the way people were doing, the business are doing, they find solutions. And what I come down is not about ESG, it's about wanting to find viable solutions that they make interest to everybody and that have impactful outcome. And that means something. I mean, you have to find the solution in a good way. I mean, people, I think with the pandemic, they realize it. Actually, personally, I treat it like, okay, we're in a war zone, if you think about it. So we have to find the solutions. And I agree with Gabriela, what she said. Gabriela, the good thing, and this is what I like about her industry, that she's ahead. I mean, in the industry she is, they're all a bit ahead. You have to find solutions. The good thing, because the environment and pandemic show us exactly, starting from the climate, I think the environment is number one, because it's where we all live. So you have to protect the environment, when the environment is everything. It's not only the climate, it's everything. And then also you have to see how you will get out of this, to do investments, to find people come around and to work around having a solution. So it's good thing that you have many jurisdictions getting involved and sharing views, knowing people what they did, how they're doing it, how they're addressing it. Doesn't mean that because London is doing it, Cyprus will do exactly the same, or it's like this time in the US, but at least you get the ideas and you can exchange views. And the good thing now with the disruption of what's happening with the internet, you come closer to people, you find a way. I agree exactly what Gabriela said. Before, you have to get into a plane and go and meet people and everything. See, now we are 4 people across the globe and we're sharing ideas and views, and it's here. So ESG, through the pandemic, you may not, a lot of you may have not understand that was actually they were applying ESG. So it's the culture, it's the governance, and people, and you need commitment, definitely, in everything. Even to get solutions, I mean, to get the platforms, to get the fintech, the sustainable finance, you get solutions. So I think we're getting there, but we can discuss it later, this what's coming up and what's already in place. Step by step, we will get there.
Excellent. Thank you, Nicole. I know you mentioned briefly Cyprus. You come from Cyprus, so I think this is a good segue into our next question, which is a combination of 2 questions. The first of all is basically, how is ESG being handled in your jurisdiction, in your case, Cyprus? And also, is there anything that is happening in Cyprus that might be of interest to the greater global ESG world? Now, let's talk specifically about Cyprus. We could talk then about Gabriela's work with in London, and then we can take the Latin American perspective from Claudia. So Cyprus, Nicole, anything interesting?
Yes,
or what's the status right now?
Yeah, the status right now, okay, after the pandemic, as part of the European Union, we are lucky enough to be part of the Resilience Fund, which is funding coming from Europe to support side effects of the pandemic in the economy. And one of the major things that we have to address now as Cyprus, but it's all EU member states, is to update and enhance some of our laws and regulations, and to get people to be involved more in ESG factors. I mean, funding has to be to follow and get the puzzle added, the pieces of the puzzle. As Cyprus, though, because we have followed that, especially for finance, as we're talking about finance and being a financial lawyer, actually we're ahead on many things that is on the financing side, because we have applied, for example, the sustainable finance and the disclosures regulations. We started from the SFDR, the Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulations, is applied now from 2021. And actually one of our major regulators, which is the Cyprus Securities and Exchange Commission, where I happen to be part of it, has a published a guidance on this, and also the investment fund managers, they have to come out and they have to address ESG factors and about the asset management, which is the finance. So we got to go back to, there is a steps and they're moving. So I'm not that of being hardcore regulatory compliance, because there's money, there's cost, but gives you a guidance, and we have the guidance. There's a lot of way to do because also of the resilience fund, because we have to adapt some of the laws, but I think every jurisdiction, every country has to do this. Being part of the European Union gives a bigger picture, which gives you a bigger understanding how to aim to address the UN 2030 agenda, which European Union has come first to address under the European Green Deal. So actually the big industries and smaller industries are coming out and looking for solutions like fintech, like other ways how to get involved in their business, in their sustainability business plan. Also, circular economy, it's one of big part as a model and following that, and it's getting there. I mean, we have in our jurisdiction, we are not London, we are not US, but definitely we are in a good way and we're going there. And I think the regulators are on board on this, starting first from the Cyprus Securities Exchange Commission, with the same like SEC in US and the FSA in London. So money talks, and they have to go ahead if they want to stay in the business, in the industry. Not like a carrot on the stick, but it's there. And they're there, they're very into it. The taxonomy regulation, the disclosure regulation, the non-financial matrix has to have matrix and to be able to quantify where investments are going. They have to consider. So I believe we're in a good way. We're a little behind than US and London and UK, but we're in a good way. We're in a good track, I hope. Like, fingers crossed. We're getting there. Okay, we're small, but we're getting there.
That's all that matters for a small island like Cyprus. Thank you. Gabriela, your take from the UK. What's how is ESG being handled in your particular field, and also anything interesting that you would like to add that you think people should know about?
I think a few very important points. One is that I think EU is definitely leading on the ESG space. There is no doubt about that. ESG is broadening. That's a very first point that I would like to highlight. ESG is broadening. We have our indices licensed in Asia. There's interest there. It's not a concept that China has embraced. China is all about the innovation part of things, a bit skeptical on the whole ESG, and the US is catching up with the new administration. So that's, I think, is the big picture. Europe is definitely leading. Nicole will be happy to hear that our two funds are Article 9 funds. So in the UK and in Europe, unfortunately, Brexit took place. So in the UK,
don't worry, if you're Article 8 and Article 19, definitely Cyprus is on the map. EU is on the map.
EU is on the map, no doubt. So we are what's called an Article 9.
Brexit, see what Johnson will do. Sorry to interrupt, Claudia, sorry. But it was good what you point, Article 8 and Article 9, because of our people, it's part of governance.
Exactly. So the funds have to be very specific about whether or not they have a tangible environmental impact. So this is the regulator saying, we have a problem, let's address it. The problem is greenwashing. We have an issue with taxonomy, even amongst us that are big believers and use ESG and are part of the industry. We don't sometimes use the same terms, the same definitions, right? So we need to address that. These ESG scorecards is something that has to be addressed, because it's like a credit rating, right? There is consensus in how those metrics need to be quantified. The same thing will eventually have to evolve on the ESG scorecards, because if you speak to the data providers, and we spoke to them all, ISS, Sustainalytics, MSCI, Arabesque, Truecost, all of them, a lot of fantastic minds doing a lot of work. But if you ask to see, we always ask to see Tesla's ratings, there's no consensus. They're literally all over the map. Right? So we need to address that. And the regulator is on top of it and saying we need to do better. The consumers, the investors deserve better. So you know, tightening the language and making sure that we elevate, right, the funds. We have to be, you know, state your purpose, state your metric, right, state your impact. How do you go about doing things, or do you negatively screen? So broadly speaking, when we think about ESGs in terms of funds, right, you talk about funds that exclude and focus on innovation. That's exactly what we do. We completely exclude. There's no E&P, absolutely no tolerance for coal-fired power plants, right? So we exclude these activities and we look for the companies that are innovating, mitigating climate change, right? And you have on the other side of the spectrum, the funds that include and hope to transform, right? That's the carrot and the stick, the shaming, if you will, right? So, oh, look here, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, the great corporate citizens, they score so high. Look at the laggers, right? Let's hope they do better. There's merits, you know, in that approach. There's a lot of great people trying to bring more change, right, with that kind of approach. So what the regulators want is more transparency. We need to be more specific about what we need, and what we're all doing and what we're bringing to market. And then what we see, my final point, is the US following suit. SEC in June, they closed this public hearing where they went to all stockholders and asked them, you know, what are your views on disclosures? What are your views on climate change indicators, on the companies having to report more metrics like EU taxonomy, right? In Europe, that companies will have to report accordingly. So the US is looking to what is being done in Europe, right? And engaging the local players in the US. And as we know, US is a very big market, right? Whatever they do, the world hears, right? So I think we're on the right track.
Thank you, Gabriela. Excellent. Last but not least, our perspective from Latin America. What's going on in Latin America? And is there anything interesting there that might be kind of embraced by the rest of the world?
Yeah, well, I think that on the government side, Latin America is way behind. We have laws. Maybe some countries do have some incentives, but with the whole ESG, having the norms and laws that makes these companies have metrics and to quantify with the ESG scorecard, no. They would have some aspects, all very, very much concentrated on issues for corruption, which is a main issue for all of Latin America, and all the focus is going there, and narcotics and AML and all those issues and bribery. So that's I think the focus of many of the companies and of the governments are. And so, and of course, some kinds of norms for the environmental side, but it's not obligatory unless you are in a company or a corporation that deals and impacts directly the environment, like tourism, like that. But as I said, the norms and the laws are not there, and that is a big issue. There are regulated companies on the regulated side that may have a regulator that will be asking some issues, but still mainly on the governance side, not the social part. But maybe only on the labor side, which of course the labor code needs to be updated, but the environmental side is very much lacking. There needs to be more cross-wide regulations for all companies, even though if they're not regulated. So we need that, especially if you're going to have to do business. That's maybe an incentive or a way out. If you're going to do business with the government directly, that may be one way on it, and other incentives for these companies to be more innovative. That doesn't mean that there are not entrepreneurs and companies making innovation on these issues that have this mindset, especially the young people going into business and entrepreneurship. So they know about this and they're very socially adept, that they're trying to force that. And of course, the civil society coming from the S side of ESG, trying to push that, and of course to protect the environment. But we are in Latin America, as I see it as a whole, very, very dispersed. And we need to be more concentrated and unified, follow maybe what the EU has done, and then have those laws and norms that will make this will make us go forward on this aspects. So that's what I see on Latin American side.
Thank you, Claudia. I mean, I just a comment as another Latin American in this webinar. I mean, I can see a great disparity from a country, let's say like Costa Rica, which focuses on sustainability and environment and tourism, versus a country like Venezuela, which
exactly
is mismanaged, and it has all sorts of corruption, governance, environmental issues, given that it's a huge petroleum producer, etc. So I can see how there needs to be more
yes.
more coherence, or more greater unity in terms of working on these issues. Thank you, Claudia. We have about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to kind of toss the last question out there as a conclusion of sorts. We've discussed the past, the present, and let's look at ESG moving into the future. So the question is pretty straightforward. Where do you see ESG heading towards during the next decade or so? What do you see with ESG in terms of the environment, sustainability, or social governance, etc.? Claudia, do you want to kick us off with that one? Where do you see ESG going? And you could take it from the context of Latin America too. I mean, if you like.
Well, as was said by Nicole at the beginning of this presentation, this is not going away. So you have to deal with it. Deal with it. It's not going away. It's a metrics and how you're going to quantify all of this. Take it and lead with it. It makes totally business sense to do it financially, of course. And the companies that will be truly resilient in the coming years are those that will rethink their business models. And this is a way to it. This is a beginning of a map to do that, to think of this in a more sustainable way, in a more ample view of all of this, and bring all of this experiences into it, think for the future, not only what you're going to gain out financially to be a better equipped for a citizen, how you're going to impact the lives of everyone in the whole supply chain and of the society. Think of that integrated from the beginning of the process, how you're going to think about that service or the product that you're going to have, and how it's going to impact the climate, and the rising levels of social consciousness is going to pull this away all the way through, and it's going to come up and it's going to have its consequences. And you're going to find yourself, if you don't have ESG on your mindset, you're going to find yourself without a business. And of course, if a country doesn't see this in the future, it's going to lag behind. And in the future, I see consequences as we have maybe international sanctions or whatever. That could be a way for making it a more integral or more competitive, equal competitiveness in a global way of seeing the things. Maybe that's going to come through. And of course, if you have investors, international investors, and you don't have ESG, and you don't have those metrics, and you don't have those reports, you're not going to have those investments, of course. And it's going to cost you way much to have access to international funding. Truly, that's what I see.
Thank you, Claudia. Nicole, what's your take?
I follow up what Claudia said, which I really believe on what she said is something that we will see more rapidly now, because it's not something new, but unfortunately it became new for some areas and some jurisdictions. Also, what I can see, and we have seen it actually happening in big companies like actually asset managers, BlackRock, or even ExxonMobil had an issue recently. You will see the bigger investors, they will not just let it go. They will look into it, they will review, they will know all the policies. So ESG is a general thing. So each organization has to see it, get the governance and see all the ESGs and decide where they want to go, how they want to invest. I'm saying everything. Also, the other thing I totally agree with Claudia is also depends on the governments. There will be a competition between the governments eventually, and this depends from less advanced or developed countries, but usually you may see examples. We have seen, I mean, my team here, the sustainability, we have seen it not from companies, from governments that you don't expect. For example, in internet level things, I have seen ESG ahead from India. I didn't believe that I didn't believe it. I mean, for the internet, okay, it doesn't mean on something else on social, but you see Thailand, or you see Maldives, for example. I have worked on funds on the environmental side. So they're independent, but interconnected. It's not going away. It's a big thing. But I agree with Claudia that may not see it now, but sanctions are coming. And they will not come in the 2 years, probably will come in the decades, but then also is the competition between the jurisdictions. Okay, sanctions is the carrot and the stick, but also it gives another thing, the sanctions. I don't believe that you have to wait for sanctions to something, but if it's something that has to be done, it has to be done. So that it depends on each jurisdiction and each government, how they want to address each thing. That's why I'm coming back. It's different. You see the Latin America and the more general US America. And then it's different, the South Africa and the Asia, or you see China that goes for innovation, and you say other jurisdictions that go for environment, still are all in the ESG. So it's there. You just have to identify. And the funding, it's a big thing. It's a very big thing, the funding. So have to see the whole picture and to find solutions. And I agree with both Gabriela and Claudia, but you need to segregate each thing and then to have a good, very good executive committee or a management team to see the whole picture of a company, not to be isolated. To be isolated on each department, but the bigger picture has to be unified and identified where they are and where they want to go. And then add the puzzle.
Perfect. Thank you, Nicole, for those final words. Gabriela, last but not least, your take on where ESG is headed?
So ESG is broadening, right? Like we have a conviction on that. So 3 to 5 years from now, it's going to be universal. We also have conviction on that, which is to say that now, again, in the financial sector in particular, when you look at products, ESG, it's kind of used as a way to describe a theme, right? So you have all sorts of funds, and then you have the ESG funds, as if they were just a fraction of the all existing funds, right? In 5 years, ESG will permeate everything. All the funds will have to have that ESG metric. We think that the direction of travel is clear. And the US following the lead of the EU, we're on the right path. So that means that no investor, no company, no fund will be able to put something forward that does not have the sustainability, the SDGs, all of those very relevant frameworks incorporated. So we're hopeful. The future is bright. And I think that companies that are heavy emitters, companies that have very poor governance, they will be under tremendous scrutiny, rightly so. So that will be destruction, right? We are, which, climate change is part of that. There will be tremendous opportunities. There are abundant risks everywhere. And there will be a lot of losers. There will be companies that will not make it. Rightly so. That's capital markets being a source of change and being a source of good. You know what? You have, terrible sustainability standards. You sell a very bad product that the world really doesn't need anymore. you either reinvent yourself or you're going to go belly up. And we've seen happen, from, so the likes of Kodak or Blockbuster, right? Companies that had very solid business models that, they disappeared because the world evolved. So that's something that we talk to our investors a lot, right? Be very mindful of all the risks, and this ESG screening is extremely relevant also as a way to look for risks in all the companies that some people associated with fossil fuel that some investors continue to find interesting. We're going through a rotation this year, right? So a lot of growth names have sold off, and a lot of best performing stocks or some exploration and production companies like Marathon Oil is one of the best performing stocks in the S&P 500. I question that strategy. I can understand why we're going through this rotation, but if you're going down that path, there are so many risks. So again, ESG is here to stay and will be used as a tool more and more. And then companies will be scrutinized under those lenses, rightly so. So we're hopeful.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Gabriela. One thing that, just kind of struck me right now is, we looked at ESG from the company's perspective, and we actually didn't really touch upon it from a consumer or a customer perspective in terms of, why is ESG important to the consumer, to the current kind of, the young professionals who are looking, to buy things or to join companies or to, invest in certain companies. So, that could be a topic for a whole other webinar that we could actually look at it from that perspective too. So that's interesting.
Excuse me, Mateo. I think that
yes.
I did touch on that point a little bit. It's like they are very social aware, and they are pushing this in innovation side, and they want to have things done differently. And of course, the part of only concentrating on the financial aspects and not being aware of other issues that need to be talked about: human rights, socially, environmentally, having a governance that is conscious of their employees and of these shareholders that are very much in tune, and then go into a company, and make it aware of what's going on, or they just practically get themselves on the boards to move these companies in what they think is the right direction. That's more active shareholders. That's going to be one of the aspects we're going to see more in the future.
This is true what Claudia says, and I totally support you on this, because you see the new generation, even if you see what on the basics, what their options, what to study, and they're looking into study for sustainability to understand that they knew the consumers have a long say, is the social part. And it's also about how they interact and what they're looking for. And the thing is, they know more than probably what we know. So I'm putting myself on it. It's just, you see the change, it's in the society. So we can say the social now, not only. Right, exactly. I mean, that's a topic. That's a topic for another webinar on consumer. Exactly. Anyway, I know some of you have to run, so I wanted to thank the three of you, Nicole, Gabriela, and Claudia, for participating. I'll get some admin issues out of the way and say goodbye. To everyone listening in, we'll have a recording out and a transcript within the next week or 2 weeks, so stay tuned for that. We'll email everyone about it. And also, if you have any follow-up questions for any of our panelists, you can send me the questions and I will make sure to pass them along and we can get some answers for you. So with that said, thank you very much, Nicole, Gabriela, and Claudia. It was a pleasure having you with us, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.